It's Big Board Sports with Roger Weiland on 104.5 The Team.
Hey, we're going back-to-back beat writers, columnists, sports editors, Times Union, because at 10:45, big game James Allen has spent the entire weekend at the Carrier Dome out in Syracuse, as did my colleague Ashley Miller from WNYT, watching three teams. Glens Falls, put them in any order you want. Cambridge went first, and then it was Glens Falls, and it was Troy. All three teams winning state titles in high school football. An incredible weekend for Section 2, and all right down to the wire. Big game James Allen up at 10:45 with his reaction and thoughts on that. In the meantime, Pete Iorizzo was in the house last night for the Albany Cup. Pete is the sports editor of the Times Union and the columnist, and we react to his columns every Monday morning here on Big Board Sports, and he joins us for a few minutes. Good morning, Pete. How are you?
Hey, guys. How's it going?
I'm good, Pete. Let's just get your thoughts here, just overall, generally, your impressions of the atmosphere and then of the game and the win by UAlbany over the Siena men.
As far as the atmosphere goes, I mean, I think if UAlbany was out to show that it's capable of hosting games in the Albany Cup Series, it certainly did that. To me, I didn't see anything last night that would make me think that there's no reason SFQ couldn't continue to host the Albany Cup in the future. If going forward, two things I would say. One is I'm not sure the Sunday night of a holiday weekend is necessarily the best time to play the game. Maybe that was just the way the schedules worked out this year. But I did think the student showing was probably a little bit less than people would have liked, and I'm sure Sunday night had a lot to do with that. A few people noted this morning, and I kind of felt the same way. I thought the crowd was a little bit subdued at times, and maybe that has to do with it, being the end of a holiday weekend and being a Sunday night too. But overall, it was I thought the school did a great job with the event, and there was some great thing about ticket prices during the week, but at the end of the day, they were all sold. So I think UAlbany will have a good case to make that it can continue to host games in this series. And as far as the game goes, the first half was just, I think, too much for Siena to overcome. I was really surprised and amazed how thoroughly they outplayed Siena in that first half.
Yeah, there's no question they did, and they regrouped, and if Siena would play with the intensity level that it did in the first half, the way they played in the second half, maybe perhaps the outcome is different. But I thought that Will Brown, his defense was rock solid for just about the entire game. Now in the second half, Marquise Wright got going a little bit. Nico, they have so much talent, start to top to bottom with about 9 guys that all can get it done. And they had a full roster last night. Was Nico was back after his 3-game suspension. But I thought the UAlbany plan defensively, and then the fact that Rowley and Steyer were able to stay out of foul trouble most of the night, I thought that was a big reason why they were able to win that game.
Yeah, I think foul trouble was a big problem for Siena, too, especially early in the game when I think Bisping had his third foul with, 9 minutes to go in the first half or something, and he had 2 in the first 4 minutes. So that essentially rendered him a non-factor for the rest of the game, really. Wright, too, for as well as he played, was kind of in and out of foul trouble for most of the night. And, I'd agree with what you said about UAlbany's defense. It was obviously much better in the first half than it was in the second half. I thought the most amazing stat of the night was Siena makes 17 of its first 19 shots in the second half and loses the game by 11 points, which is actually pretty hard to do, I think. And it shows you how one-sided the first half was. And
I know that both coaches had, they were jawing back and forth going into this game. And in the post game last night, Jimmy made a real point to say, look, he didn't realize just how good David Nichols was. David had a career high 29. He was the best player on the floor last night. Just played a great game, start to finish offensively. But then when they asked the question to Coach Brown, he was like, I don't know how you could not know that Nichols was this good of a player. There's a lot of film out there.
In fairness to Jimmy, there's a lot of film out there from the first few games this season. But before that, coming into this season, I'm not sure any of us
Yes.
how good he was.
No, and I even said at the beginning of our show, I didn't realize how good David Nichols was until I really saw him in the preseason before they played their first game against Penn State, because he was really pretty much a non-factor for last year's team and didn't play in this Albany Cup game a year ago.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm not sure if Will actually heard what Jimmy said. I think it was relayed to him in a question. I think he might have thought that Jimmy was trying to slight David Nichols, and I don't think that's exactly what Jimmy meant. No, I think he meant, I saw on film and I thought he was really good, but then you see him live and you say, wow, he's really, really good. And I think that's the impression that everybody in the building had last night, that boy, this guy, certainly point guard is not going to be a position that UAlbany's going to have to worry about.
Pete, what did you think of the technical foul that Jimmy Patsos got and when he got it?
I thought it was extremely poorly timed. For two reasons. One, your team is in the middle of a run, and you cost your team 2 points. But I actually thought as big of a factor as the 2 points, I mean, the crowd was really, really quiet in the second half. Mostly because UAlbany didn't really get any sustained momentum going at any time. Siena just kept chipping away and chipping away, and you could sense them starting to get a little bit nervous. And then, Jimmy gets a technical foul, and the place goes crazy. And it was like it woke everybody up. And, I really thought I think Siena did cut it to 4 after that. So I guess it's hard to say it was the turning point of the game, but it certainly set their comeback back by a couple minutes. And when you're trying to come back from as far a deficit as they were, you kind of need every second of clock that you can get. So I thought that was it was terrible timing, and I think Jimmy would agree that he needs to exercise a little better self-control there, especially because a few minutes had passed.
Yeah.
And he was upset about the charge call on Bisping, but I mean that had been like 2 possessions earlier. So, at some point, you need to move on and make sure that doesn't cost your team, a full probably 90 seconds later.
Well, it was a 5-point swing there because you had Cremo hitting the 2, you got the ball out, and then David Nichols bangs down a 3. So it was actually a 5-point swing with the technical on Coach Patsos. Zach?
Pete, I thought, we had talked about the layoff for Albany coming into the game, the fact that, Will Brown had a week to prepare, and I equated it to Andy Reid coming off a bye. Just a stellar record, just like Will Brown, when he's got a week to prepare for those championship games, he's 5-0. And I thought he did a masterful job going zone for the first time this year, almost baiting Siena to take threes and take that advantage of Bisping and Oganyemi away. And I thought Siena took the bait.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Clareth had an outstanding second half, but, the first half, what did he shoot 5 threes? And I think he missed all of them. And, they obviously it was a big part of their game plan to key on Oganyemi. There were guys running at him every time he touched the ball. And like you said, they were probably worried about Bisping, but essentially because of foul trouble, he ended up being sort of a non-factor anyway. So, yeah, you're right. I completely agree with you about Will Brown. He's certainly shown himself that in these big game situations where he has a week to get his team ready, he's gotten pretty good at doing it.
All right, Pete, what do you think happens next here? I mean, we all want to know if this series is going to continue. I keep saying there already is a game scheduled. Well, it's not scheduled yet, but it will be. There's a game next year that concludes the 3-game series here, and it will be played at the Times Union Center. But what do you think long-term is going to happen? Will Brown has been very adamant that he wants this game every other year played at the CEFCU. Do you see that happening?
I think if I had to bet on it, I would bet that it'll be back at CEFCU. I'm not sure it'll be back there every other year. I think that Siena would want it to be at Times Union Center every year, and Will would want it to be at CEFCU Arena every other year. And I'm thinking that they're going to end up meeting in the middle somewhere. Maybe it looks like the way the series is set up now, where you got a home game for Siena, a home game for UAlbany, and then technically a neutral site game in the third year. Could you play at a Times Union Center and just have it, be part of both teams' season ticket packages for most years, and then mix in a game at CEFCU every few years? Maybe that's a way to do it. I do think at the end of the day, both schools, I should say, will come together and figure out a way to keep the series going. I think the fact that Siena was, after 15 years, finally willing to concede and come to CEFCU Arena shows that they have an interest in keeping this series going. And the fact that Albany was willing to accept the series as it was for, more than a decade, going to Times Union Center every year, that shows that they, too, have a vested interest in continuing to play the game. I think everybody realized that it's in the community's best interest to keep the series alive, and I would bet that they'll figure out a way to get it done.
Roger and Pete, our buddy Steve D'Agostino texted in. He has an idea. He said, have the game at St. Rose and charge $500 a ticket.
There you go. That'll solve the problem. Dags, I knew you would come up with something really good for us on the show this morning. That's the way. Dags is a true businessman. Just make sure I get the court Friday night with my fourth grade travel team. Anyway, it's all. Listen, it was. I thought, at the end, it turned out to be a really good game. I agree with you on the fans. I mean, the students were not out in full support, because I think a lot of them were still away for Thanksgiving weekend. So I think that weekend would be one to stay away from. But overall, I think UAlbany handled it well. Jimmy Passo said at some point in that postgame that this was a fun place to play. He made some reference to it being a fun night. So I think had he had won, it'd been a lot more fun for him. But it'd be hard to argue that the people who went there last night didn't enjoy themselves and have a really good time. There were no issues, and at the end, it turned out to be a close game.
Yeah, exactly. If your question was going into this, will this work? Could you play this game at Sefti Arena? I mean, in my mind anyway, the answer was yes. For years and years, it was the idea was sort of dismissed as unworkable, and I think last night proved that it can work. 4,500 people came out and watched an entertaining basketball game and probably enjoyed themselves. So, in my mind, that makes the event a success.
Pete Iorizzo every Monday morning reacting to his column in the Times Union, and Pete, the sports editor and the sports columnist for the Times Union. Pete, thanks for a few minutes. Have a great week, Pete. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me.
You got it.